You walk into the lot on a Saturday morning and it feels like controlled chaos in the best way. Rows of cars stretch out under the lights. Engines cough to life one at a time. An auctioneer's voice rattles off numbers faster than you can follow, and paddles snap up in the crowd like it's a stock exchange floor. Somewhere in that noise, cars that were worth nothing an hour ago are suddenly worth thousands. And you, standing there with a clipboard and a cut of every single sale, start doing the math in your head. This looks like easy money. Buy nothing, sell nothing, just take a fee off the top of every transaction that happens on your turf. Here's the problem. You are not actually in the car business. You are in the trust business, and trust is a lot more expensive to build than a chain-link fence and a gravel lot. An auction house doesn't make money by owning cars. It makes money by getting strangers who don't trust each other to hand over money and titles in the same room, at the same speed, without anyone getting cheated. That single function, verifying and moving ownership fast, is the entire business. Everything else, the lights, the auctioneer, the concession stand, is just theater built around that trust. So let's break down what car auction house actually means, because it isn't one business. It's at least three. The first type is the dealer-only wholesale auction, places like Mannheim or Edesa now folded into Carvana's operations. These lots don't let the public in. They exist so franchise dealers can trade inventory with each other, moving a used Camry from a lot in Ohio that doesn't need it to a lot in Georgia that does. The second type is the salvage and insurance auction, dominated by Copart and insurance auto auctions, which move totaled and repossessed vehicles from insurance companies to rebuilders, exporters, and parts dealers. The third type is the public collector auction, the Barrett Jackson and Meekum model, where a crowd pays admission to watch six-figure paddles fly for a numbers-matching Hemi Cuda. Same word, three completely different economics, three completely different customers, and three completely different risk profiles. Whichever version you're building, the money comes from three places, and almost none of it comes from owning the cars. The first is the seller's fee, a percentage or flat charge taken from whoever consigned the vehicle, usually somewhere between 3 and 10% of the hammer price. The second is the buyer's premium, a fee stacked on top of the winning bid, often 5 to 15%, paid by whoever just won the car. The third, and this is the one nobody pictures when they imagine an auction house, is ancillary services. Transport fees to move the car off the lot. Storage fees if it sits too long. Inspection and condition report fees. Title processing fees. Floor plan financing for dealers who need to borrow against inventory they haven't sold yet. At Copart and IAA, these ancillary charges can make up close to half of total revenue, sometimes more, which means the auction itself is almost a loss leader for the fee machine wrapped around it. Now here's the number that should stop you before you sign a lease. Copart, one of the two dominant salvage auction operators in North America, runs on gross margins north of 40%, and its stock has been one of the best-performing industrial stocks of the last 2 decades, not because it's great at selling wrecked cars, but because it owns land. Copart has spent years quietly buying and holding thousands of acres of real estate across the country, land it uses as vehicle storage yards. That land appreciates independently of every single auction that happens on it, which means the real business model, the one investors actually reward, isn't moving cars fast. It's controlling scarce, zoned, road-accessible land near major population centers and running an auction on top of it as a way to keep that land generating cash flow while it appreciates. That's the counterintuitive insight. A car auction house isn't primarily a service business. It's a real estate holding company that happens to sell cars to pay the property taxes. If you're not buying land at that scale, you're not competing with Copart. You're renting a much thinner version of their model, and your margins will look nothing like theirs. Let's talk about what it actually costs to open one, because this is where the fantasy usually dies. A functional auction lot needs somewhere between 5 and 20 acres depending on volume, and in most metro-adjacent markets, that means either buying land in the low millions of dollars or leasing it for $8,000 to $20,000 a month before you've run a single sale. You need paved or graveled lanes for vehicle movement, fencing and security, a sale building or covered auction lane with a PA system and bidder seating, an auctioneer, either salaried or paid per sale, ringmen to spot bids, a title and paperwork department. Because a single mistitled vehicle can trigger a lawsuit that erases a year of profit, tow trucks, or a contracted transport network. Insurance, and this is a big one, because you're holding other people's property, your liability coverage alone can run $50,000 to $100,000 a year before you sell a single car. All in, a modest regional auction house, one that isn't trying to be Mannheim, realistically needs somewhere between $1 and $3 million to open its doors. And that's before marketing spend to convince dealers and sellers to trust you with their inventory over an auction house that's been running for 30 years. Here's the break-even math, kept simple. Say you're running a small salvage-style auction, moving 200 vehicles a month, with an average hammer price of $4,000. Your seller's fee is 5%. Your buyer's premium is 10%. So together, you're pulling roughly $600 in combined fees per vehicle. That's $120,000 a month in gross fee revenue. Now subtract your fixed costs. $15,000 for land lease, $20,000 in payroll for auctioneers, ring staff and title clerks, $8,000 in insurance and licensing, $10,000 in transport and lot maintenance, and $12,000 in general overhead. That's $65,000 a month in fixed costs. Subtract that from $120,000 and you're sitting at $55,000 a month in operating profit, which sounds healthy until you remember that number assumes 200 vehicles a month, every month, consistently. In a business where volume is entirely dependent on relationships with dealers, insurance companies, and repo agencies who can walk to a competitor with one phone call. Which is why the good year and the bad year for this business look almost nothing alike. In a good year, you've built relationships with 3 or 4 regional dealer groups and a couple of insurance adjusters who default to your lot. Your volume climbs toward 300 or 350 vehicles a month. Your average fee holds steady or climbs as used car values stay elevated, and you're clearing $80,000 to $100,000 a month before taxes, enough to expand your lot. Add a second sale day, and start looking like a real regional player. In a bad year, used car values drop, the way they did coming out of the 2021 to 2022 pricing spike, when wholesale values fell more than 20% in some segments. Your per-vehicle fee shrinks even if volume holds. One of your 2 anchor dealer relationships gets poached by a competitor undercutting your buyer's premium by 2 points, and your volume drops to 130 vehicles a month. Suddenly, your gross fee revenue is $39,000 against $65,000 in fixed costs you can't shrink fast enough. Because you're still paying the same lease, the same insurance, the same core staff. You're now losing $26,000 a month, and the same fixed costs that made you profitable at scale are the exact thing bleeding you out when volume disappears. This is exactly the trap that pushed dozens of small regional auto auctions out of business during the post-pandemic used car correction, unable to match the land holdings and financing scale of Copart and Mannheim, who simply absorbed their market share. So no, you were never really running a car auction. You were running a trust machine, sitting on top of a piece of land, betting that enough strangers keep showing up to make that land pay for itself twice, once through the fees, and once through the dirt underneath your feet. You walk back into that lot on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. No auctioneer, no crowd, just rows of cars sitting on gravel worth more than any of them. And you finally understand what you actually own.